All right, greetings and salutations, Game Guy fans. Just heard here for some breaking news. A couple of thoughts on it. This is JC Shurburtt, Inside the Gamecocks, the show, Inside the Gamecocks, thebigspur.com, Chief Sports. Thank you for tuning in right here on our YouTube page. The South Carolina Board of Trustees met today and gave head football coach Shane Beamer a new contract. And that's going to, when you total it up, it's worth $50.4 million through 2030. Maybe I should have learned how to coach, I think, sometimes. But the money is awfully good in it. It's not, you know, it's still seven figures. There's some coaches making eight. I think Bill Belichick is getting 10 at North Carolina. But it's a good contract. I think that it's deserving. You look at the bottom line, and it's a bottom line business. And Shane Beamer has the same record Steve Spurrier did through his first 51 games as a head football coach, 29 and 22. And that's a Spurrier set the standard around here. Kind of ran up his record later on in years six and up. But Beamer's off to a tremendous start. I think that when he took over the program, it was definitely at a low point. 2-8. Although that was a pandemic year, that team probably was a 5 or 6 win team if they'd had their normal schedule, just to be honest. But 2-8 was not pretty. Will Muschamp getting fired, and just the exodus of players, although he did keep quite a few, and just kind of the ugliness that season as a whole in college football was all about. But then the Gamecocks, in and of themselves, and then putting together staff during a pandemic, recruiting during a pandemic. I mean, there were some challenges. There were some challenges, and nobody gave him a break because, whereas you hire somebody like Steve Spurrier, everything he does is gold to the fan base. You hire Shane Beamer, and everybody wants to talk about the fact he's never been an offensive or defensive coordinator, including some members of the media. We have a stupid list on Inside the Gamecocks, the show, and I'll retroactively add this quote from a writer. Won't say his name, but he wrote this when grading the Beamer hire, and then ranked him as the worst coach in Power Four. He said, Beamer has never been a coordinator, so he probably can't recruit, unlike a guy like, say, Brian Harsin at Auburn. Very curious. Harsin got that job at Auburn about the same time, Beamer was hired, same offseason. Auburn fired Gus Malzahn after Gus won 6 SEC games that year. No, nobody, South Carolina probably did need to make a change because with Muschamp, year 4, you bottom out to 4-8. You're probably not gonna make it on a 2-8, even though there were a lot of challenges with that last year that were beyond Muschamp's control. So you had to make a change there. Auburn, though, I no idea. They did lose to South Carolina that year, though. Gamecocks beat Auburn and Vandy, and then lost 6 straight at the end of the year. But it was a tough time to take it over. He comes in, that first team, like a lot of first teams coaches have, was deficient in a lot of ways, especially at quarterback. And you look back on that and you see how important quarterbacking is. And heck, that team won 7 games, won a bowl game against North Carolina. The next year, they go 8-5 with Spencer Rattler coming in. The next year, 8-5 with Spencer Rattler coming in. We know the situation there with the OC and all that, but got some feathers in the cap by beating Tennessee, knocking them out of the playoff, and beating Clemson. That's 2 top 10 wins. And they go to the Gator Bowl, lose to Notre Dame. The next year, 5-7 happens. All the naysayers start to get nervous. And I say naysayers, I'm not calling anybody out. I understand that this institution, this athletic department, through its history, historically has done better and quite well when they hire somebody that's done something somewhere else that's really good. Ray Tanner in baseball did win at NC State before he came to South Carolina. I mean, Eddie Fogler in basketball, who won the SEC, did take Vanderbilt to a Sweet 16 and won the SEC there as well. So even if it's not a Steve Spurrier, Frank McGuire, Lou Holtz type of hire, most of the time, go back to Jim Carlin, who was a good coach who coached in the 70s and 80s, coached George Rogers to his Heisman Trophy. You know, he had won at West Virginia and won at Texas Tech. Joe Morrison was probably the closest thing to a hire that worked out in football, and a guy that didn't have the track record. You know, he was the head coach at New Mexico. Now, he won big there and had won at Chattanooga before, but New Mexico, obviously different level than South Carolina. And he comes east, and he was kind of, if you want to be truthful, before Spurrier, he was the most unique coach the Gamecocks had. 2001 started when he was there. The Man in Black. I mean, he did some things to kind of set the stage for modern Gamecock football. And he's one that South Carolina, unfortunately, he passed away in February of 1989. But he's one that South Carolina football can look at and say, that was our guy. You know, he's synonymous with it. Steve Spurrier, obviously, is the winningest coach of all time here. His name's on the practice facility indoors. But he's always going to be known for Florida. And they're going to talk about Duke. You know, his name's on the stadium at Florida. And then Lou Holtz always will be remembered as Notre Dame. You know, so I get it. You know, this program normally in any sport, hires like Paul Maneri in baseball coming up, his debut season, have worked out more than taking a flyer on someone. I get it. Totally. And Shane Beamer had no head coaching experience, no record to point to. And you know, come in the middle of a mess with the pandemic and not being able to go on the road recruiting and stuff like that. I totally get it. But the 5-7 record, despite reality saying, hey, this team, you know, is deficient to start with in some ways, and then other things hurt them, such as the injury situation up front on the offense. Spencer Rattler's running for his life, the Juice Wells thing, the fact they didn't have a running back. I mean, there's a lot that went in to 2023 being 5-7, and you know, a couple disappointing losses at home to Clemson and Florida go the other way. Nobody's even talking about that. But it set in the off season of sorrow. Like it was like the nothing from the never ending story had descended on the fan base. Very challenging for me. Not that I was all hunky dory and happy and, you know, sunshine and rainbows, but you always reset. In today's college football era, you can always restock your roster. I felt the Gamecocks had. I felt that the recruiting class that I talk about on coffee every morning deserved a lot more credit than people were saying, but they were stuck on this, that, and the other. It was bad. You know, Big Spur, social media, everybody was just sort of down. And then Old Dominion happened. That did not make it easier. Even a blowout win against the great Mark Stoops in Kentucky in week 2 only got people excited for a little while. It took till November to snap out of it. I get it. Passionate fan base. Kind of glad standards are higher around here. I don't know that it's helpful to wallow in your sorrows all off season and continue to pile the negativity on. You know, that's probably not good, but I get the passion. So that's where we came till this season. And then Beamer, started 3-3, 2 gut-wrenching losses to LSU and Bama. I didn't see that coming. I didn't see, well, they're going to be, 3-3, but probably could have beaten Alabama and Tuscaloosa, lost by 2, and should have beaten LSU had it not been for some amazingly terrible calls and other things like injuries that didn't go their way. Because I thought, Alabama and LSU, up until this past year, you look at both those programs and you're like, God, you got to play those two in the same year. I remember when Tennessee was kind of trying to get it going under Butch or Derek Dooley, and LSU would rotate on the schedule. And so their 2 Western opponents were LSU and Alabama. That's tough, especially when you're trying to build or whatever. Carolina wasn't trying to build this year. They had some young players, but it ended up being that LSU's probably a game they should have won, and frankly, Alabama too. Probably certain days they're the better team, and for stretches of those games they were. So that's pretty good. Then they get on a roll, blow out Oklahoma on the road, which I thought, it was that's a feather in your cap, man. Anytime you go to Oklahoma and win like that, I don't care how down they are. They beat A&M again. Nobody has done that since Shane Beamer got here, and beat him pretty badly when they were in the top 10. Snapped the streak with Missouri. Got another win at Clemson. Beat Vanderbilt. Survived that again. That's one of those things. As that streak grows longer, you worry about it more and more every year. And so he's done a lot of good things to earn this contract, which is not, like I said, it's not at the top of college football. This is kind of standard for good coaches. And some may say, well, he wasn't going anywhere. Why'd you do that? Because you want to take care of your people, right? And I'll remind everybody, when Shane Beamer was hired, he was making 2.75 million a year, which was by far the lowest in the SEC. He bet on himself in many ways. And I admire people that do that. I certainly admire people that do that. And like I said, he stepped into a tough situation. It wasn't something that everyone else wasn't going through at the time, but that 2021 class was small. They did get some good transfers in. Some of those players actually made a difference. TJ Sanders was in that class. Bam Martin Scott was in that class. Debo Williams was in that class. I told everybody, yeah, maybe ranked 96th or whatever the hell it was, but it's good. There's some players in there somewhere. Heck, Nick Barrett's coming back next year. He was in that class. So, tough situation. They got recruiting going. There were some misses, got backfilled through the transfer portal. And Shane's got 3 top 10 wins. That's more than anyone within their first 4 years around here. He's 2-2 against Clemson. Spurrier started 1-3. Muschamp didn't beat him. Holtz was 1-3 in his first 4 against the Tigers. I guess Brad Scott, you had to go back. He was 2-2, exactly like Shane. 2-0 up there, 0-2 in Columbia, which historically South Carolina's record at Memorial Stadium is much better up there than in Columbia. And they played in Columbia many more times. They used to play it every year on Big Thursday. South Carolina's finished in the top 25 2 out of 4 years. They had their first quarterback drafted since Todd Ellis and Spencer Rattler. 3 bowls in 4 years, pretty standard around here. The last several coaches, starting with Spurrier. The Gamecocks were in playoff contention and were a topic in college football. It stinks they didn't make it. But the fact that they were in the conversation the very first year it goes to 12 and probably should have made it if you have, depending on your criteria. Somebody in the comment section, by the way, said the only people that think South Carolina should have made the playoff are you guys. That's not true. That's not true. Go look back. I mean, there were people that were voices in the sport, the opinion makers that mentioned it over and over. So that's just not true. We're not a bunch of homers sitting around here. When I say the 4 of you, I'm talking about on Inside the Gamecocks, the show. I think he was including Mike Morgan into that. Mike had like a whole presentation about it and stuff like that. I kind of felt like all 3, Bama, Ole Miss, and Carolina, deserved to be in. You probably would have had to have left one out. If that was the Gamecocks, great. I can live with that. What I can't live with is SMU and Indiana getting in over the Gamecocks. Or anybody, or Ole Miss or Alabama. But that we've talked that to death. We're talking about Beamer right now. No coach in the modern era since Paul Dietzel, who won the ACC with 7 whole wins. They were 7-0 or 6-0 and undefeated in the ACC in 1969. Tommy Suggs was a quarterback and lost to 3 SEC teams. I think Tennessee, Georgia, and somebody else. Tennessee, Georgia, I know. And then West Virginia, ironically, coached by Jim Carlin in the bowl game. Jim Carlin's OC was Bobby Bowden. Hey, there you go. You learned something by dialing in here. So no coach had won more than seven. Spurrier won seven, Carlin won seven and won the ACC. That team Spurrier won seven with in '08, I'm still convinced was his worst team. I know the '07 team was 6-6, didn't make the bowl. I'm sorry, let me back up. The worst team until we got to 15. That '08 team, I don't know, bubble gum and paper clips, they kind of pieced that whole thing together. And Ellis Johnson coached his butt off on defense, and they had enough defense to win games. And then he was rotating quarterback. I mean, it was a weird year where you just and then the bottom fell out at the end. But he did win seven and deserves it. They went to the Outback Bowl, lost to Iowa. Um, but Shane won nine, and that is the best fourth year ever. Now, is there an asterisk beside it because they have the transfer portal? Yeah, because you look at the number of players that were in the earlier classes that got out of the program that probably went down a level or things like that, and then the guys they brought in, many of them were big contributors this year, and a lot of them will be next year too. So that's the beauty of the portal. But still, when you're talking about the first time to ever do something, he did it. Year four is usually like scary. And then you go into year five and the coach is on the hot seat. And then it's a vicious cycle with programs. I think the transfer portal helps you with that. But it's not just as easy as saying, oh, the transfer portal. You have to go get the right guys in the transfer portal. You have a budget and all this other stuff now. So it's not just as easy as he's got the transfer portal. He should win in year four. No, not always. There's examples of that it's about getting the right guys out of the portal, but he's done that. I don't know. We're going to talk about the NFL draft numbers coming up on Inside the Gamecocks, the show today. He could have a record draft this year. Now, not all of them are guys he recruited. Obviously, there's still some guys Will Muschamp recruited, but the Gamecocks, I think seven's the most, maybe eight through the years since I've been tracking it. There could be more than that, but we'll talk about that later. He signed the first two out-of-state five-star recruits in the modern recruiting era in Nick Harbor and Dylan Stewart. That hasn't happened before. And in general, South Carolina's landing more blue chip prospects from the high school ranks. I mean, it would be a much slower process if it weren't for the portal. So all of that adds up to a deal. I think 6 years, 50.4 million. Starts out at 8.15. It goes up 100 grand every year. And I hope I did the math right on that. $50.4 million. Shane Beamer, a little over 8 million a year, and it climbs. Plus there's performance bonuses and things like that. I know some of you may want to know about the buyout on, if he gets fired, it's a percentage of your contract and goes down goes down every year. So you're not going to fire him next year, no matter what happens. It's just not going to happen. So it's it and coaches, I think, do that on purpose. And I think you're going to see whereas there for a while, and I mentioned Gus Malzahn earlier, if it was even borderline, schools would just fire, now that you're going to have to pay players out of your money, 20 million a year, all that good stuff. You don't know where this money thing's going. And you saw it around college football this year. A lot of schools normally, Sam Pittman 6-6, you'd have an interim and there'd be a new coach at Arkansas. That would normally be what happened. I think Michigan turned it around enough for Sherron Moore, but if this were previous, you may have a situation now Ward Manuel's making that decision now. He's on the stupid list. So who knows? But before they beat Ohio State and beat Alabama, they may have made a change. Just kind of looking at it as you're kind of the interim like Zach Arnett at Mississippi State. Florida obviously, when they were really struggling, could have pulled the trigger and has before in the middle of a season. 3 times I can remember. They did it with Zook. They did it with McElwain. They did it with Mullen. And they even did it with Muschamp right before the loss to South Carolina after that happened. Last time the Gamecocks won at the Swamp in 14, they fired him that next Monday. He coached 2 more games, but was fired. So Florida will do that, and they didn't. They stuck with Billy Napier. So I think you're going to see, and fans may not like this because everybody loves a coaching search, right? Less and less of firings. Mike Norvell, as good as they were in 2023, you go 2-10 at Florida State, that's fireable. You get fired, you know. But no, they held serve. So we'll see. Kentucky and Mark Stoops, another example of that. I mean, in the previous era, he'd probably be gone, but not gone this time. So, in conclusion, that's what Shane Beamer got. I think he's deserving, and I think in general, if you're South Carolina, you have to be happy because this is another guy or a guy in football, a coach, and everybody loves coaching around here. There's a lot on coaches that coach at this school and in the SEC in general. It's finally a coach you can call your own because that's his legacy as a coach is being the South Carolina coach and the guy that's doing well and has it headed in the right direction. So big contract, big day for Beamer. Well deserved. And we'll see, to whom much is given, much is expected. The expectations are going to be high next year, and we'll see how it turns out. But again, just wanted to comment on the breaking news here. Shane Beamer with a new contract worth a total of $50.4 million, a little over $8 million a year. That's up from $6 million. The Board of Trustees did that today, approved that today. I also want to say this. The new athletic director did work on these contracts for Dawn Staley and Shane Beamer, but Ray Tanner got it going. I see some people out there saying on social media that, finally got a real AD or whatever. These things just don't come together that quickly under a new AD. That's, it was in the works. There's negotiation with agents and things like that. So anyway, gonna hop on Inside the Gamecocks, the show here in about 20 with Mad Dog Mullinex. By the time this video's up, the show will be going. So but wanted to pop in and talk about this. Shane Beamer, new contract with South Carolina.